Have you ever walked into a place and just felt like something was off, like a chill down your spine?
Oh, yeah, like a bad vibe.
Exactly, like a bad vibe that you can't quite explain.
Like some energy lingering there or something.
Yes, that's what we're going to be diving into today. A case that unfolded in a place that should have felt safe and familiar, but instead it became the backdrop for a brutal murder.
Oh, okay, so where are we headed?
Evansville, Indiana, back in 1973.
Ooh, a classic cold case. I love those. So, who's our victim?
A woman named Anne Klene, a dedicated teacher at Lockyer College of Business.
A teacher.
Yeah, she was working towards her master's degree, had dreams, ambitions, a whole life ahead of her.
And what happened?
Well, on June 19th, 1973, her life was tragically cut short. She was found stabbed multiple times, lying in a pool of blood right outside her classroom.
Oh my goodness, in her classroom.
Yeah, it was a temporary classroom set up in the basement of the old courthouse.
The courthouse. You'd think that would be one of the safest places in town.
Right. It's so unsettling to think that something so horrific could happen in a place that's supposed to represent justice and security.
Absolutely. It kind of shatters that sense of safety, doesn't it?
It really does. And to make matters worse, the killer seemingly vanished into thin air.
Okay, so no witnesses.
Well, one of her students, Dennis Clem, he also worked as a custodian at the courthouse. He'd been in her classroom just minutes before her estimated time of death.
So a really narrow window of time for the crime to happen.
Exactly.
Which suggests someone who knew the building knew Anne's schedule.
Right. And the police immediately suspected that it was someone Anne knew. They ruled out robbery pretty quickly because her belongings weren't touched.
Makes sense. And what about her husband?
He had a solid alibi. He was at work in another town.
So the focus shifted to people in her circle, students, colleagues.
Right. And you can imagine the chaos that ensued. The police were interviewing everyone, trying to piece together a timeline, but no one seemed to have seen or heard anything out of the ordinary.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with no murder weapon and no blood trail leading away from the crime scene, it's almost like the killer just vanished.
Wow, that's strange. No blood trail at all.
Nope, nothing.
So either they were incredibly meticulous about cleaning up, or maybe they knew a way out of the building that wouldn't leave a trace.
It's a mystery that has baffled investigators for decades.
So where do we go from here?
Well, despite the dead ends, there were a few leads that emerged, some more promising than others.
Okay, tell me more about those. What caught their attention?
One of the first things was a blood stain found in a nearby building.
Oh, really? Like in another office or something?
Yeah, a janitor found it on a water fountain in the basement, not far from where Anne's body was discovered.
It does make you wonder if it's connected.
Right. But forensic technology back then wasn't as advanced as it is today.
So no DNA testing.
Nope, they could only test the blood type.
And did it match?
Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to definitively link it to Anne.
So close, yet so far.
Exactly. It's frustrating to think how a simple DNA test could have potentially cracked this case wide open.
Absolutely. DNA testing is like a game changer in these investigations.
For sure. But even without conclusive results, that bloodstain was a significant clue. It hinted at a possible escape route for the killer.
Like, they knew how to navigate the building's underbelly and slip away unnoticed.
Exactly. But then, a few days later, the police received another tip. This one really sent chills down their spines.
Oh, what was it?
A pharmacist at Columbia Pharmacy, just a short distance from the courthouse, reported seeing a man covered in blood come into his store.
Wait a minute, covered in blood, right around the time of the murder.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's a major lead.
Right.
Did he give a description?
He did. He described him as a white male in his 30s with bushy brown hair. Even mentioned he was driving a blue car.
Did they ever find this bushy-haired man?
Well, that's where things take an even stranger turn.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
While investigating this lead, the police came across an incident from the previous year. A man named Daryl, known for drug use and robberies, had been killed during a pharmacy robbery in late 1974.
Hold on, so he was already dead when the pharmacist saw this bloody man?
Yeah, it seems impossible, right?
So how could he be a suspect?
Well, a woman who knew Daryl called the police and suggested they look into him. She said he matched the description.
Interesting. So they had a potential suspect who was dead, but fit the description and had a history of violence.
And as they dug deeper, they learned that one of Daryl's friends claimed that Daryl had confessed to killing Anne.
He confessed. Did he say why?
There's no record of a motive, but get this, the friend also claimed that Darrell had given him the knife he used to kill Anne.
He kept the murder weapon.
Yeah, he called it a good kill knife.
Oh, that sends chills down my spine.
Right.
So, did they ever find the knife?
They did. The police got the knife from Darrell's friend, and it's still in police custody to this day.
But I'm guessing without DNA testing back then.
They couldn't conclusively link him to the crime.
What a frustrating situation. They had the potential murder weapon, a witness claiming a confession, a suspect who fit the description, but without that one crucial piece of evidence, it all just amounted to a dead end.
It really highlights how much forensic science has advanced since then.
It's amazing to think how differently this case might have unfolded with today's technology.
Absolutely. But the story doesn't end there. There are more twists and turns to come, and even more potential suspects to explore.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what happened next. This case is already so captivating.
Well, we'll have to dive into that after a quick word from our sponsors. Stay tuned.
So it's 1982, almost a decade since Anne Klene's murder, and the case takes yet another turn.
Oh, really? Another twist.
Yep. A woman calls the police with some interesting information about her old tenant, a guy named Nicholas.
Nicholas.
Yeah, and get this, he had actually been one of Anne's students at Lockyer College.
Okay, so another potential suspect pops up. This time a former student, years after the crime. What made this woman come forward after all this time, you think?
You know, that's a good question and something I wish we had more information about. But what matters is her tip breathes new life into this investigation, and the spotlight is now on this Nicholas.
So, did they find him?
Well, not right away. Nicholas doesn't actually contact the police until the year 2000.
Wow. So he reaches out to them. Talk about a plot twist.
Yeah.
What makes him come forward after almost 30 years?
According to the reports, he claims he's been having these blackouts and this nagging feeling that he might have been involved in Anne's death.
He thinks he might be involved.
He goes as far as telling the police he remembers stabbing her 16 times in that courthouse basement.
Wow, that's a pretty hefty claim. So what did the police do? They must have taken that seriously.
Oh, absolutely. They fly down to Florida where Nicholas is living to interview him, and they even give him a polygraph test.
A polygraph, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Just for our listeners who might not know, can you quickly explain what a polygraph is?
Oh, sure. So a polygraph test, sometimes people call it lie detector test. It basically measures things like your blood pressure, your heart rate, even how much you sweat when you're answering questions.
And the idea is that if you're lying, your body will react in a way that the polygraph can pick up, right?
Exactly. It's supposed to detect those little physiological changes that happen when you're not being truthful.
So what was the verdict on Nicholas? Did he pass?
The results actually came back inconclusive, making this case even more complicated.
Oh, of course.
Plus, his story had some holes.
Really?
He couldn't remember key details about the crime scene, and every time they interviewed him, his story seemed to change a bit.
So a potential confession, a polygraph that didn't really give a clear answer, and a story that keeps changing. This Nicholas guy is a real enigma.
Yeah, for sure. To be certain, they took his fingerprints and DNA and compared it to evidence from the crime scene. No match.
Of course not. It seems like every time they're getting close, something throws them off track.
Right, but that's the thing with cold cases. Evidence can get lost, memories can get fuzzy, and it makes it that much harder to find the truth.
Absolutely. So what happens after this Nicholas lead fizzles out?
Well, the case goes quiet again for a while. Then in 2005, a phone call from Texas throws another curveball and brings back that idea of jealousy as a motive.
Hold on, Texas. Yeah. How does Texas fit into all of this?
A woman calls the Evansville Police Department saying she knows a friend who confessed to killing Anne.
She confessed.
Yeah, supposedly this friend confessed to killing Anne out of jealousy over a guy they both were seeing.
So that love triangle angle keeps coming back, even though there's never been any solid proof.
Right. The police went to Texas, found the woman, but she completely denies ever confessing.
And I bet they asked for a DNA sample.
You bet they did. And guess what? It didn't match any evidence from the crime scene.
Shocker. So, we've got Darrell, the possible confession, but no DNA. We've got Nicholas, the former student with a shaky story and no physical evidence, and now this woman from Texas. Every new lead seems to point in a completely different direction.
That's what's so fascinating about cold cases. Time can distort the truth, make evidence unreliable.
And we're left with more questions than answers.
But in the quest for justice, the search for Anne Klene's killer didn't stop there.
You mean there's more? They get another lead.
In 2020, a new tip surfaces, and this one might be the most chilling of them all. A woman contacts the police saying her boyfriend witnessed his own mother killing Anne when he was just a kid.
Wait, are you serious?
Eh.
A murder with a child present?
Yeah, this is heavy stuff, and if they can prove this tip to be true, this could be the key to cracking the case wide open.
Wow, this is crazy. What do they know about this woman? Was she connected to Anne in any way?
Well, the tipster gave them enough info that they could find this woman, and it turns out she was actually one of Anne's students back in '73.
Wow, okay, so this tip might actually have some legs.
As far as we know, it's still an active lead. They're working hard to verify everything and hopefully gather some solid evidence.
It's unbelievable. After all these years, this case is still active.
Hmm.
You know, it's really a testament to the dedication of these investigators and their commitment to finding the truth.
Absolutely. But with all these twists and turns, all these potential suspects, it's almost impossible to know where the truth lies.
Right. So how do we make sense of all this?
Well, that's where we put on our detective hats. Let's dive into all the different theories and see if we can make some sense of this tangled web of evidence and speculation. Where do you want to start?
It really is a puzzle with some pieces missing and others that just don't seem to fit.
Yeah, like you said, where do you even start with a case like this?
Right. Let's go back to Daryl for a minute.
Okay, Daryl, the guy with a record.
Yeah, on the surface, he seemed like a really strong suspect, right?
He did.
A history of violence, that possible confession, even the supposed murder weapon. But if you don't have that DNA evidence, can you really say he's the most likely culprit?
It's tough, you know? You have to be careful with eyewitness accounts.
Especially after so much time has passed.
Exactly. Memories change, details get mixed up, and who knows what reasons people have for coming forward after all these years.
Plus, we don't really know anything about that friend of his, the one who gave the police the knife and said Daryl confessed.
Yeah, what was his deal? Was he trying to protect someone?
Maybe he had a grudge against Daryl. Who knows?
It's possible. And then we have Nicholas.
Ooh, Nicholas. His story is just bizarre.
Right.
I mean, to confess to a murder after all those years talking about blackouts and suddenly remembering stabbing Anne.
Yeah, it's like something out of a movie.
Exactly.
But then the polygraph was inconclusive, no DNA match, and his story kept changing.
Makes you wonder if maybe he was struggling with some mental health issues or just an overactive imagination.
Yeah, guilt can do strange things to a person.
Absolutely. Okay, so then there's the woman from Texas. Seems like the jealousy angle is a recurring theme in this case.
It really does.
But once again, no real evidence to back it up.
She denied the confession, and her DNA didn't match anything at the crime scene.
It feels like someone might have just been trying to stir up trouble, or maybe deflect suspicion from someone else.
It happens. When a case goes cold, people come out of the woodwork with all sorts of stories.
And you never know what their real motivations are.
Yeah,
It's the investigator's job to filter through all that noise, right?
exactly. Every little detail matters.
Which leads us to the most recent lead, the tip about the woman who was Anne's student and may have been seen committing the murder by her own son.
Chilling, right?
Absolutely chilling. To think a child might have witnessed something so horrific, it just breaks your heart.
It really does. And if this tip is true, it would change everything we thought we knew about this case.
What could have possibly driven this woman to do such a thing?
Yeah, and especially with her child there.
It's mind-boggling. The investigators must be looking into every possible connection between Anne and this woman.
I'm sure they're exploring everything from academic rivalry to personal disputes.
Maybe even something we haven't even considered yet.
Exactly.
It's a waiting game now, but I have a feeling this lead might be the one that finally breaks this case wide open.
I hope you're right.
Anne Klene, her family, and the entire community deserve answers. After 50 years, it's time for justice to be served. And, you know, maybe, just maybe, someone listening right now knows something.
It's possible.
A forgotten memory, a name from the past, even a tiny detail that seemed unimportant at the time. Anything at all, no matter how small it seems, could be the key to solving this mystery.
So if you have any information, please contact the Evansville Police Department.
Your tip could be the missing piece that brings closure to this case and finally brings justice for Anne Klene.
It's never too late to do the right thing.
Sometimes it just takes a little spark to illuminate the darkness. Let's hope that spark is out there. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the baffling case of Anne Klene. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and always remember, every case has a story.